defendant, a potential defendant. It's not like a plaintiff who's doing it on a contingency basis. Yeah. So here it appears that Michael Cohen was paid, at least $187,500 or more for his work on behalf of supposedly Mr. Brody negotiating this settlement. That's a lot of money. I mean, Michael Cohen probably only spent 10, 20, maybe even 50 hours worth of work. I doubt it was 50 hours negotiating this potential settlement. I don't understand why he was paid this round figure by Mr. Brody, or why these payments were made.
So that's Stormy Daniels' lawyer, who's making the rounds still on all the TV shows, who's now branched out into this Russian oligarch money coming in thing. I don't know if he's the guy to talk to, or if he's just going on I don't know what's going on there.
Well,
I'm confused by the whole story, actually. It sounds like it could be significant.
There are plenty of tentacles.
Yeah.
And to help us understand what they are, we've invited Rosalind Helderman of the Washington Post to join us for a discussion for a few minutes. Rosalind, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. It's probably worth at least tipping our cap to the fact that a porn woman's lawyer is telling us these things, and why that is a bit unclear to us.
Hey, welcome to 2018. That is indeed a confusing part of this story.
Well said.
Mr. Avenatti has proven himself to be a very, very effective antagonist to this White House and to Mr. Cohen. It remains somewhat unclear where he is getting this information. However, what he seems to have access to is financial transactions that show money and where it was coming from into a variety of bank accounts associated with Mr. Cohen. And the information he has does seem to be accurate, because one after another, the companies that are listed in the information that he provided are confirming that, yes, indeed, they did have consulting relationships with this company that Mr. Cohen set up right before the elections, Essential Consultants.
So, putting aside the oddness of the source, Cohen clearly has money coming in from all over the place, and some really interesting places, including Russians. Can you run down a couple of them for us?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, let's not forget that we already knew he had money coming in. Donald Trump, of course, was paying him to be as a personal attorney to the tune of $35,000 a month, Rudy Giuliani recently told us. He also represented Sean Hannity. He represented this man, Elliot Brody, to negotiate a non-disclosure agreement with a woman, another porn star or a model.
Naked model or something.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. He had impregnated. What we learned with this new information is he also was getting money from a variety of major corporations. He got money from AT&T, which is pursuing a massive merger and needs Department of Justice approval for that. He got money from the pharmaceutical company Novartis. He got money from a Korean airline, or a Korean, I think, aircraft manufacturer that's trying to get a massive contract with the U.S. Air Force. And then he got money from this U.S.-based affiliate of the Russian oligarch. So all these people who have major issues in front of the U.S. government, they're all putting out statements saying, of course, they just were paying for insights or real estate advice or accounting help, certainly not to get things from the U.S. government. But it is sort of amazing that in the year after President Trump gets into office, his longtime friend and personal attorney can make these kinds of dollar figures. Right. Welcome to the swamp.
But so where? Yeah, exactly. But so which arena of malfeasance are we talking about here? If this stuff is not on the up and up, it's not collusion. So is this like illegal lobbying, something or other?
So, I mean, there's many different avenues that a prosecutor could look into involving this, and it does seem clear that Mr. Mueller is indeed looking into this. Without more information, we don't entirely know. I mean, yes, if he was doing lobbying work for these companies without registering, that's a problem.
How big a problem would that be? How big a crime is an unregistered lobbyist that the president knows?
I I think I was kind of going low to high. So
Okay,
that would be
gotcha.
In the low world is if he's doing lobbying and failing to properly register. A much bigger problem is if there was evidence, and I will say at the outset, we don't yet see it from what we have, but if there was evidence that you could present these things as bribes, that he was getting actual government action for these companies in exchange for their money, that would be a much, much larger problem. Then you have whether he was handling
for Cohen
money.
or the president, or possibly both.
Certainly for Cohen,
Yeah.
maybe for the companies, potentially for the president, at least politically speaking, and if the president kind of participated in the scheme. But there's a lot of facts, as the lawyers would say, a lot of facts not in evidence before we could draw any of those conclusions.
Well said. Rosalind Helderman of the Washington Post on the line. Go on.
Yeah, there's also the issue of how he was sort of moving money around and whether he was giving correct information to his banks. Mr. Avenatti, in the information he provided some information about what Mr. Cohen had told his bank when opening the bank account for this. And suggested that perhaps he had provided the bank incorrect information. That could be a serious problem for him if true. And we've got to stress that if true. We don't know that to be the case. And then finally, you get into the world of the Russian oligarch and what's really going on there. And that just kind of opens up a whole new can of worms.
I see that you won an award a couple of years back for reporting on what was going on between the Virginia governor and a wealthy supporter.
Yeah.
The whole... all of politics is way swampier than people even think, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So in the case you're mentioning, it was the Virginia governor, and he took large sums of money in the form of loans and luxury gifts and a variety of other things from a wealthy donor. And in that case, he was indicted with a quid pro quo, with forming an agreement with that man to take those things in exchange for helping his company. He was indicted. He was convicted by a jury of his peers and appealed, and his case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he won. He won a 9-0 ruling from the Supreme Court, who said that just because you take money in exchange for setting up meetings or making phone calls, that's not an illegal bribe. You have to actually affect government action.
Right. Well, and then you've got the Bob Menendez case with his buddy Solomon Melgen, which is just astonishing naked corruption, and he was acquitted for that.
And so
in my opinion,
we've been complaining for years. I mean, just the idea that these companies are giving money to campaigns or politicians or whatever and not expecting to get something in return. These companies are smart and tight with their money. So I mean, how big a sucker would I have to be to think they're just doing it out of the generosity of their heart? But yet, it's very difficult to prove, and the Supreme Court has now made it the law of the land. It's really difficult to prove, and so it's going to be tough to take down the swamp, isn't it?
Well, and he's swimming in a world where this is not uncommon, right? I mean, You have a series of Trump aides who, after working on the campaign, went out on the market to sell this kind of advice and insight about the administration. And of course, it's not new either. It's pretty much what the president ran against. And so, whether this becomes a criminal matter, I think you're raising good points to suggest that it may well not. And then it just becomes a question of whether Americans believe that they were voting to end this kind of stuff when they voted for President Trump. A political issue, essentially.
That's absolutely a valid point. More broadly speaking, I would like Americans to understand a little better how government actually works. Rosalind Helderman of the Washington Post. Rosalind, we sure do appreciate you spending a couple minutes with us. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Well done.
Man, how great is she?
Oh, she's terrific.
She is really good.
And you know what? The highest compliment I can pay her is she went to Harvard and didn't bring it up, which shows incredible restraint. So, yeah, listen, to bang the drum that I bang so often, that is what big government is. Don't you understand? You keep buying their sales pitch that they are going to bring you a utopia and help the downtrodden and right all wrongs if you just make the government bigger. And that's what happens. You go to D.C. and they just trade enormous amounts of money around and everybody gets rich. And then they laugh at you.
Well, I don't know if these people go into office talking about presidents, completely lying to us or they try and fail. But in my adult lifetime, everybody that's become president ran on the idea of, I'm going to end this crap. And they don't.
Right.
Clinton did, Bush did, Obama did, and Trump did.
Yeah.
I'm going to put an end to this whole thing. And they either can't or don't.
The only thing you can do is divest the government of power. Then it won't have the power to do this. Here's a quick reality check for you. If I'm running AT&T, Michael Cohen is one